And we argue in the book that a lot of the things that are called biases by people who are wedded to the economist concept of rationality, and we're talking here about behavioral economists as well as traditional economists, that a lot of what are called biases are actually evolutionary adaptations to an uncertain world.
I had Mary Hirschfeld on the program, and she talked about how resistant people are to the economist's idea of treating sunk costs as sunk. We smugly say, oh, people are so stupid. They're so irrational. They don't realize that sunk costs are sunk. But she pointed out there are often good reasons for treating sunk costs as not sunk and paying attention to them rather than ignoring them. But shouldn't it give economists pause that we have to debate people to convince them of something that we claim is in their interest? It should be a wake-up call. Mervyn, talk about that and talk about it more generally, this issue of rationality.
So I think both John and I have found that when we talk about radical uncertainty to groups of economists, they say, well, of course, we understand that there is something called radical uncertainty. But if we're going to produce our models, and if our PhD students are going to get their theses, then they have to have something to optimize. Expected utility is what they have to maximize, and then you can write down a mathematical model and get an answer out. And we describe these really as in the genre of puzzles rather than mysteries. Now, a puzzle can be very helpful because it may give you an insight into something. We give examples of models where the assumption of optimizing behavior gives real insights. We give the example of David Ricardo on trade between England and Portugal, which produces the counterintuitive conclusion that even if you're more efficient than any other country in the world, it still pays to trade with them. And the example that George Akerlof produced of a market in which price wasn't determined by supply and demand because the price was conveying information to one side of the market but not the other. And that sort of model he had, in which people had differential information which undermined the ability of the market to reach an efficient outcome, is a very helpful insight. But what it isn't is a description of the world. And I think the great danger of the use of models by economists is that they believe that this applies to the whole panoply of human life. And as John said, it applies only to small worlds, a very narrow range of situations in which the axioms of choice under uncertainty, which Morgenstern, von Neumann and Morgenstern popularized before the Second World War, in that sort of world, then the models can give you useful insights. But the vast range of decisions that people actually take, whether in government or in business or indeed in their personal lives, are not decisions which are characterized by a small world. They're in the larger world in which we simply don't know enough to pretend that maximizing expected utility is the right way to make a decision. And indeed, whenever economists are appointed to serious public policy positions, they do not go around saying, I maximized expected utility this morning using a model, and this is the result. They actually approach it in a very different way. And I think we need to recognize that sensible people do that in the world. And we have to broaden our horizons in realizing that the sort of rather narrow models that economics have produced can be extremely useful in generating some insights, but they're only part of human life, and they're not the greater part either.